Yes.
Oh, thank you. Okay. You lost your chance, though. It's done.
I was watching. I was just glad that it voted the way I wanted.
Yeah.
Nice to see you, Tim.
Recently or back?
Okay. Yeah, we're on the record.
All right, good evening, everyone. This is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Montclair Planning Board. Notice of this meeting is published in the local paper and also posted in the lobby of this building. We are being broadcast live on Channel 34 and streamed live on montclair.peg.tv. First up is our roll call.
Chair Nguyen,
Here.
Vice Chair Brodock.
Here.
Mr. Schwartz is excused. We have a new member, Mr. Cook.
Here.
Councilor Schlager.
Here.
Miss Willis. Here. Mr. Rooney.
Here.
Mr. Ian Wally.
Here.
Miss Lockman. Here. Mr. Barr. Here. And Mr. Gilmer.
Here.
Okay.
We have our minutes from January 28th.
I received comments, changes from Mr. Brodock, Vice Chair Brodock, but I know that Ms. Lockman had some more significant changes that she's working on.
Yeah, right. So I am kind of just for the rest of the board's edification here, I kind of objected to the minutes being so bare bones and thought they should be fleshed out a little bit, since it was, in my view, an important meeting where the public got to say quite a bit. And yet, just commenting, I think, in my view, that should have been fleshed out a little bit more. So I started to do that, but I didn't have time to complete it. So I guess, Janice, are we tabling the minutes until I give you some input or whatever?
That's the board's decision.
Okay. Well, that was what I had requested, that I do intend to look at them some more, and I've actually been going through the video and writing what people have said, and it's easier to edit out than edit in. So when I finish, I'm happy to pass that around to the board, and you can take out what you don't think is appropriate. But I thought giving more so people can see the, as I called it, the tenor and the passion and the good points that the public made was really valid to put in the minutes. So, if any,
I would move the table until the
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with tabling it, but bear in mind, the function of minutes, and maybe give some thought to maybe having some general overall comments.
yes.
If you want to talk to tone, we'll look forward to what you want us to consider.
Yeah,
when you're done.
I understand that, John. That's why I thought it's better to add more. You can, please take out what you think is inappropriate, but I do think that, it was better to give more of what the public was saying. I think it's kind of, they had a lot of good points, and a lot of them spoke and passionately, and I thought the minutes might reflect some of that passion and good points. So, as I said, feel free to edit it as a board when I do them. Okay?
Okay. We have an application that is going to be carried.
That's correct. Evidently the applicant has hired a new engineer and a new architect. This is for 59 Glenridge Avenue. And I've been told by their attorney that they won't be ready until the March HPC meeting, because they're going back to the HPC first with their revised plans. Then they'll come to here. So the public hearing has been postponed to April 8th.
Okay.
Is that the Domino's Pizza?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, and then we've got a referral from the council regarding Haynes redevelopment.
Yes. As you know, I sent you, everybody, copies of the amended Haynes redevelopment plan at the second meeting in January. If anybody doesn't have a copy of that, I have extra copies here. I just didn't want to send them out twice. So if anybody needs an extra copy of the report from Ira Smith to the council, or the redline version of the Haynes redevelopment plan showing the changes, I can provide that to you.
I would have a copy of it,
Okay.
but I have what you sent right now, and there was things that I didn't see from
So you need another one?
the, yeah, I would take, not a copy of what you sent this
Right.
time, but a copy of the original that.
You have it, right?
I may have. The red button, is it the same as this one here? There's one other, right?
That's it, you got it.
Okay, good.
Anybody else?
Can you tell us the date of the one that you're referring to now, so that we're all looking at the same thing? I think it's, the one that's,
28 was the one that, yeah, you have it.
yeah, it's 118.
Yeah.
Oh.
And there was a cover memo from January 28.
Yeah, okay, yep.
Yeah, so you have it.
Yeah, that's it, right.
Okay. Yeah, Mr. Ian Wally has a conflict.
Janice, I have a thing. This is from the HPC for next Thursday's meeting, but it's supposed to be.
That was not distributed to the planning board because the HPC hasn't taken any action on it. That's a draft HPC document.
So it's not included in any of this?
No,
Okay.
so the HPC, all right, let me give you a little background.
Please.
The council introduced an ordinance to amend the redevelopment plan back in January, I think on the 22nd. By statute, the planning board has 45 days to respond. If you don't respond, the council can adopt it without taking into consideration your comments. It does not go to the HPC. The HPC, however, is interested in commenting on the amendment to the Haynes redevelopment plan, but their meeting is not until Thursday. So they're working on their separate set of comments that'll go directly to the council because there's not enough,
Okay.
a timing issue. They can't send their comments to the planning board, so it's going to be an independent report to the council. Because
Okay.
ultimately, it's the council that adopts the redevelopment plan. So the purpose tonight is to compile a response, a report to the council about how, what your position is on the changes to the redevelopment plan, which I tried to flesh out in a little bit more detail in the memo that I prepared dated February 20th. The redevelopment subcommittee did meet, and they did meet with Ira Smith as well, to kind of get a little bit of background about the genesis of his comments to the council on the changes. So that's what's summarized in this report, and I think the purpose of tonight's meeting is to get feedback from the planning board as a whole that we can condense into another report to the council.
I'm curious about exactly what is the profile. For example, I'm wondering, we haven't said how many apartments is going to be there, right?
Well, you can back into it because of the density. So I think it's 74. The density would permit 74 units.
And there'll be one bedroom, two bedroom, three, we don't do that.
We don't do that.
Okay.
And that's 74 units if, depending on what kind of building envelope, the proposed building envelope?
Right, exactly. What they did, and I think
So if it was a bigger building envelope, it would be more. If it was a smaller,
I think it's capped at 74. It's based on
Is
units
that
per
the cap?
acre. That's the
Okay,
cap.
that's the cap,
It could
okay.
go smaller, but it can't go higher.
okay,
Yeah, it's 90 per acre or something, and that comes out to 74.
Right.
okay.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the
And it-
maximum, but it doesn't have to be that.
And I was a little confused as I was reading this. I'm not quite sure. Is it that the final decision was basically that the first floor was not going to be business, it was going to be all apartment? I was a little concerned about
That was the recommendation from the planning board redevelopment subcommittee, as I understand, and John's on the subcommittee and so's Carmel, that they felt that it would be preferable to have, and let me paraphrase what you said, the increased front yard setback, because that was one big difference. Your recommendations were for a 10-foot setback in the front yard. The council, the EDC, kept the front yard setback at 0 so that it was in line with the adjacent Wedgwood building.
Yeah.
part of the rationale was to create a transition point between the downtown and the open space in the front yard and side yard areas characterized by the houses of worship in that area. This building is really a transition area, and so that was, as I understand, is the rationale as to why the planning board wanted to have that front yard setback rather than maintain the traditional street wall that you find in the downtown.
Janice, it would be helpful if you put the renderings of the architect
Okay, I mean, I
on
did
the
pass them
on
out
the
to
screen,
everybody.
just so we can all can look at this. I think.
And just to add to what Janice has said while she's doing that, if you turn to this sheet, the overview, the aerial view, one of the things I think that we discussed in the meeting was that historically there's been a push or a thought to extend the commercial corridor around to connect up with Valley Road piece. And when you look at this map, and given the and here I can even given the way that we are the buildings that we have in the vicinity, and the basic things, responses that we've heard from the public recently. We've got the church here, we've got the church here, we've got the Board of Ed here, and none of that is coming down, ever. Right. Basically, okay? So you got all this green space. This is directly across the street from the church. There is no corresponding commercial property across the street. This commercial really faces on South Park, the corner commercial. You do have some wraparound on the Sienna, but it really stops almost even with the Park Street building. So why extend commercial down this way? Let's push it back. Let's open up the green corridor here. And so that's kind of what we discussed.
Yeah, that was absolutely the thinking of Martin, myself, and John, is that rather than having this other big wall of building that comes right out to practically to the sidewalk, you have something open space that leads you into the open space of the churches, which are in that's first of all, it's an historic district, bear that in mind, and three of the buildings there are on the National Historic Register, and then there are about 3 or 4 other buildings that are on that 1983 historic preservation list of
And they're all low-rise.
buildings. They're all low-rise. So the IRA was kind of saying, let's extend this, like John is saying, let's extend this commercial look around the corner. And our little committee was saying, no, let's not do that. Let's extend the greenery up instead of having it all commercial. And so the thought was also that maybe we should just allow an apartment building rather than having commercial space on the first floor as well. That, came up.
And I think we were also troubled by the I don't want to say footprint, but by the size of the building. About, it seemed rather blocky, it seemed
Yes.
Imposing, and so we had suggested that there be some substantial setbacks as it went up.
Right.
And we had even discussed, the possibility of adding another story if it was a small penthouse, like, to give them some more units, because we know by pushing it back, you're going to be taking away units. And I think Ira pointed out that it might cause some difficulty with the mechanicals of the building. And
also, I think, John, he had said, when you get above a certain story, you have to build with steel.
Right.
Yeah.
So it would be more. It could be more expensive.
Yeah.
He did mention that the rear of the Park Street building was kind of raw, with that unfinished. But I think that could be addressed separately.
Yeah.
That's something that could be camouflaged, could be updated, could be addressed to blend into the transition. Hell, plant a tree there.
Yeah. Something. Put graffiti on nice, artwork on the wall.
Or some artwork or something like that.
Something like that. You see that all over the place in Jersey
This drawing
City.
has an arcade.
Pardon?
Yeah, if you
In
look
front.
if you look at the brown section that's colored,
first floor is an
and the
arcade.
first floor is an arcade. It's the upper floors that go out
Right.
to the front of the building. But even that arcade is, you know, it doesn't give you that open space, not with the rest of the structure of the building. I mean, it might work if you changed something else, if you changed the rest of the building.
Right.
But based on the current configuration, you know, it's going to be perceived as a building coming out to the sidewalk.
And it's not up to us to do the architectural
No,
drawings.
I
We
just
just
was
want to
thinking
tell them, we want expanse before the
arcade is
building.
giving you covered space.
Yeah, yeah.
The rest of the building needs a lot of
still a
work.
Oh, it needs a lot of work, and that's why I was curious about what the HPC was saying, because once again, this is in an historic district.
Is the footprint of this just that parking lot?
Yeah.
It is.
Yes. And this building, you have to understand too, something this size is going to have a presence on Park Street, because you're going to, and it's also going to have a presence on Bloomfield Avenue, because you'll be
Oh,
able
yeah,
to
you
see
see
it
it,
on the
right,
other side of the
absolutely.
Bloomfield Avenue
Yeah.
storefronts.
And behind, I
Especially
think
for
it's
that
the new
restaurant.
restaurant that's
Yeah.
coming up that extends to have
It'd be
outdoor seating,
beautiful,
so it'll
got a
like
nice
loom
building
over.
there.
Yeah. So just to give more context, so what
Yeah.
happened was, back in December, our little committee met and discussed this, then it went to the EDC, and then we met again after the EDC commented, and they didn't really agree with much that we said. So
Okay.
I'm kind of curious if Robin doesn't mind filling us in on what the EDC's thoughts are.
Well, this is why I was wondering about the economics of it, you know, in terms of.
Well, I don't think it's our, you know, purview to think about the economics of it. We want
The
to.
economic development is the.
Oh.
and it's the-
Oh, I know, that's what I'm
Yeah.
saying, let her tell us what their thinking is. And we had offered our committee to meet with the EDC, but they didn't want to meet with us.
But you ultimately decided on no setback, that's going to be, I was reading the.
Right.
What you said was proposed and what you rejected.
Not we,
you
them.
know,
Mhm. Yeah.
You know, but these were our recommendations.
Okay.
You know, and what we, you know, in the dialogue with Ira, what was communicated back
Yeah.
to the EDC. You know, so, and I understand, you know, I can understand their position. You know, there has been, when we looked at this site before, we were willing to put a more substantial building on the site. It was a different kind of building. You know, it served a different purpose. It had a different design, and, you know, it was a different time.
Yeah, I think
too.
now you're seeing a lot of people, I don't know what you're hearing, but people are absolutely rejecting the large building
Right.
that's going up in town.
We've had other buildings in town
Yep.
that, you know, and so we have to, you know, we do have to have some balance. You know, regardless of what you think of the other buildings that are in town, they're there, and so we must consider their presence, you know, in figuring out, you know, how much we want to add to that and where we want to add to it.
I mean,
you
this
know.
is a prime location, yeah, right in the heart of downtown.
And there are a lot of other buildings.
There's a lot of low-rise
that,
buildings.
well, there's
yeah.
a lot of high-rise
Yeah,
buildings
there's
that are
the two.
similar to this too.
Yeah.
But again, that's why I look at the aerial building, and when you look at the green space that is adjacent to this, it just seems that it's better to enhance that
Right.
than it is to enhance the other commercial side.
And that's also true in the light of the fact that we have an awful lot of empty commercial space. So here we are building more new commercial space. What's going to happen to the space that's empty? I mean, one would think that if there's a pressure for commercial space, let's try to get the empty space that's already empty filled up if we can help that
And
effort.
this building, this proposal isn't fully parked according to our ordinance, right? Would they have to get a variance?
No, I think it is.
It is
the
fully-
use, it is fully parked.
And allows for the
20
the
spaces?
spaces that they have to provide for public
And-
also?
It includes the 20 spaces of public parking. It's fully parked for the residential. It's not fully parked for the community space, and it's not fully parked for the commercial space.
Yeah.
I mean, that was another point that we brought up. It's a very, in our view, it was a very small community space that we didn't feel like was.
What the plan does do is, it includes requirements for shared parking. So
Mhm.
through
Yeah.
shared parking, the commercial use could use that, the additional, the residential parking. So
Mhm.
that's kind of how it was designed.
But still, for community space,
Yeah.
there might still be an issue with parking if it was really actively used. And we also talked about, whether community space, you've got the churches, you've got the
Fire department, you've got schools,
Salvation
you've got
Army.
Salvation
Around the
Army.
corner. There's a lot of
There's a
community
lot of
space
community
right
space.
here.
We didn't
in
understand
this.
why community space was added to this.
And we've heard, I believe, that the constituency, one of the constituencies, I don't remember whether it was a residential or whether it's a senior constituency, would like more community space. And, we understand that too. But again, you want to have something that is really useful.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we consulted them, and they said that wasn't appropriate, large enough space for them.
Who did you consult?
Ann Lapel.
Oh.
So, that's something that we question.
Yep.
Whether or not this was really useful space.
And the other point is it takes away from the 20% affordable housing that we had 2 out of the 3 of us thought was appropriate.
I don't think it does take away from the affordable housing.
The number of units.
No, the number of units is capped.
I know, it's capped at 74, but the original, our change was to make it 20% affordable housing built in, and it's gone back to in this draft, it's back to 10%.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is that there has been an ongoing discussion about benefits that help offset the reduction. And that's something that personally I see both sides of the story, and it's something that I would leave to the council to make a determination on, because our ordinance says what it says, and the benefits that offset it really, as to whether, for me, is there's value, depends on how it's used, because basically you're talking about financial consideration, and it's where it's applied as to whether or not it's worth it to lose the extra affordable housing, But it's, I think the council's in a better position to make that determination.
But not understanding how the council really thinks about this, I understood that last June they reconfirmed their commitment to 20% affordable housing, and then this is the first time we get to look at something and it's right away, it's negotiated back down or whatever to 10%. So I guess my thought is, why do we always reduce the affordable housing? If it was understood that that was not a negotiable point, then the value of the land, the developers' financial analysis would take into account that it has to be 20% affordable housing. And the price of the land and their financials and their profit would all be taking that percentage into account. But it seems to be always a negotiable point with our council and developers. So,
and it's that dilemma as to why I say I think the council's in a better position.
Yeah.
Because as you said, they made a determination, but then there's something going on that they feel that it's justified. And it's I'm assuming it's got to be, I can't think of another, it's got to be an economic issue, which is something that is kind of outside of what we consider here, or what we're supposed to consider here in terms of planning and such like that. So, I think the planning board is on record with saying that we feel that the 20% is what should be enforced. So, like I said, I would be comfortable with leaving it to the council to make the determination and to, explain it. If there's a reason, then I'm sure they can explain it to the community as to why it's valuable enough to make the offset here. But we just don't have full information on it. So
have that information. So it had been, when we discussed this the first go-round, we agreed that 20% was the appropriate percentage.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, in the benefit of the community.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I still would like to recommend that. I mean,
Yeah, we can go back to our original recommendations,
Sure. Yeah,
and then the council they have to respond to what we recommend.
right,
That's
and they'll
right.
probably respond similarly to what we've
Yeah.
seen, or elucidate a little bit more on these other considerations, which I think is fine.
And just on dimensions, so we had recommended, was it 1,000 square feet in the front? Is that right? To connect the green space?
I think it was a 10-foot front yard setback.
And is it 100 across was the only question, just to see where the 1,000 is coming from?
I think that, that's, rather than have the 1,000 square feet of community space,
Right.
we just eyeball, eyeballed it, that if you get that front yard setback,
Right.
you'd create about 1,000 square feet of open space instead of community space. And then the community space could be a lobby or whatever inside the building, or a community space for the residents of the unit.
Yeah, and there's some green space on either end that, like you were mentioning, could be connected even by a bit of green space in front of the building. And do we know how much is in the back right now in terms of dimensions, even if they move the building further back, or?
Well, we had talked about putting the setback on 3 sides of the building, so that it was pulled back, so that, we weren't concerned about pulling it back from the Park Street building, but pulling it back from the other 3 sides so that there's green going all the way around the building, so that you have opportunities for connections.
Yeah, I think it was 15 feet in the back and 15
I
feet.
made a mistake. It's 15,
Right.
15 foot
Right.
front
And
yard.
especially in light of the fact that there's going to be a restaurant there.
Yeah.
We thought 15 feet might be nice.
Wouldn't be, would be less imposing.
And the road
to some
actually
degree.
narrows, so I'm there every day. My son goes to the daycare in the basement of the church right next to it. So in the church street, it actually narrows going up to Park, so this could be quite, the building could really loom up on the front of the street.
Oh,
So I
yeah.
think that is a really critical point.
Well, that's how we saw it. If you look at
Right.
the, I guess this is the third sheet that's attached. The perspective looking from Church Street on the other side of Park, and looking
Right.
down at the Sienna and the building, you see it's right there.
Right there.
And you also see it above. You also see how it reflects above the South Park Street properties.
The front of that building.
Right, especially because on that side, between the corner between Church and Park, I believe that's a well, I guess kind of elevated 2-story building there, right? And I don't know if that's true all the way to Bloomfield.
On
You
South
mean
Park
the,
Street? No,
yes,
there is another.
It's a very handsome building.
Right,
Yeah,
but and I
for
think
its
there's another
architecture.
tier
So,
Yeah.
towards the center, but
Right.
it's not from block to.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
because it really then disrupts a lot of the airspace all the way from
Right.
Valley, I think it is, across.
And that's why we were saying, well, we could, have it, but pull it back and make it less imposing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
Right, that one.
Am I correct in remembering that the last time there was a plan for this, it was like an assisted living?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
the church complained that it was going to block the site and the,
There were some problems with that. I think the Sienna was more of the sunlight issue. We had a lot of testimony about that.
Right.
But I do think it was raised again with the church, but ultimately, I think when you plotted it, that it wasn't an issue because of the way the sun tracks over the seasons. But, again, this is, we're kind of looking at this, when was that? How long ago was that?
The Kensington?
The Kensington.
That was probably 2011 or probably 2012.
So we're a few years down the road, and we're kind of looking at this with different eyes now. So, okay.
It was.
Even, even then, it's at least 4 years.
So going over, what I'd like to do is take your comments and draft a report. I'm hearing the 20% affordable housing set aside.
Yeah.
You want to maintain, you want to stick with the comment about the 1,000 square feet of community space? Keep that in there?
As recommended by us?
Yeah.
I would say no, I think.
Take it out?
I think so. I don't think they need community space there. I think that was the consensus of our little committee. our
Right, I don't
subcommittee.
think I don't think the way that it's proposed as a little room
Yeah, I
here,
don't think that
what you
works.
talked about, the lobby extending onto some open space in the front, that's a different kind of community
Right.
space that I could appreciate.
So you want to keep in your comment to eliminate the community space? That's in the report?
It's almost like a private room, I think, when you talk about
Yeah,
1,000
right.
square. What we're
It's-
talking about,
it's-
if you have a lobby that is open to the public and
Right.
it goes into some gardens or something, or,
Right.
some open space, that would be nice. But that's not a community space for use by the seniors or by meetings or anything like that. That's for the general public, which we thought was a good idea. Why not have the community space open to everybody,
Right.
not just these groups, right? Since it's not really useful, we thought, for little
Right.
groups.
I
group
understand
meetings,
that.
Yeah.
And I think your opinion, you still want to have the 15-foot front yard setback. I hear that loud and clear. And actually, in
And the
this...
side yard and rear yard setback,
Well,
all the setbacks.
The revised plan actually increased the side yard setback to 20 feet on the side adjacent to the church.
No, that's not how that read. It was 30 feet on the east side.
No, if you look at
What am I looking at?
Carmel, if you look at page, item 3B, minimum side yard setback on west property line, you had recommended 15 feet. The EDC, the council, increased it to 20 feet. That's the side adjacent to the church.
Hold on.
Right.
I saw
But what
some.
about the,
And on the other side, you had no side yard setback. The council proposed a 5-yard setback on the east side.
This is what I thought you were talking about. On page 2 of your February 20th memo, D, a new provision was added requiring a 30-foot step back at the second floor along the east side.
That's something, so you could get to that.
No, I know, but that's on the east side, or did you
That's
mean the
the
east side?
courtyard, that's basically matching the existing courtyard that's on the east side above the first floor.
On the east side or the west side?
On the east side. It's on the, that's really,
Can you help me? What's the courtyard?
the courtyard is on the east side above.
It's an internal.
It's internal.
it's an internal, it's a courtyard between the back of the Park Street building and the
Oh, I see.
building for the residents. Basically, it's an amenity for them, for the
Oh.
residents
It says
of
19 on
so
the
that they're not
corner
all the
of
way,
this.
it doesn't go up to, it creates that inner courtyard kind of thing.
I see it.
But we don't see
Janice
that
is
on.
pulling
Right,
it up now.
you don't see that.
Is that new?
Yeah, on the,
Here's the courtyard. We added, it
Oh.
wasn't in the regulations, it wasn't in the, so we
Back
added a
courtyard.
requirement to create this courtyard here.
Oh.
The 5-yard, the 5-foot side yard setback is here, and the 20-foot side yard setback is over here.
So what about on the north side?
I think
We're
it's
still
5
up to,
feet.
still, it's 5 feet.
In the
5 feet or
council's
15.
version, it's 5 feet.
So how does that do anything for the community, having an inner courtyard?
5 foot.
Well, basically, it creates private open space.
Private for
for the
who?
residents.
For the residents,
For the
but not
residents. And it
for, we're
also
trying to do something for the community here, not for the
No,
residents.
no, what
Well,
we're
you don't
trying to
wanna
do,
do that.
Carmel, is we're
Space for
trying to regulate the design
Yep.
of the building. And just like you require step backs
Yeah.
on certain sides, it's essentially requiring a step back above the first floor on the east. So it's really creating light air and open space. It does benefit
For
the
the
neighbor.
apartments.
Yeah,
For the
for the
apartments. You
apartments.
want to have that for the apartments so
Yes.
that you don't have
Oh, yeah,
windows
yeah,
facing
yeah.
walls.
Right,
and-
Right. So it's not a public benefit like some of the other setbacks, but it does create a better project.
Yeah, it
It crea-
enhances
it's a-
the
it's a-
value of the building.
Well, not just that. That's one way to look at it.
Yeah.
The other way to look at it is that the people who live in the building are part of the community.
Yeah.
And it's creating a minimum standard of quality of life for people who are
Renting or buying,
renting in
yeah,
Montclair.
yeah.
Right. That buildings can't be these blocks that go
Right.
up and, you have to have some space, you have to have some room to breathe on the premises.
So you're speaking of the community of residents in the building,
Right.
as opposed to the broader community?
Right.
Yeah.
But at the
Right.
expense of the front of it being, once again, kind of almost on the sidewalk.
Right, so we're fine with, I'm fine with the inner courtyard.
Yeah,
But
keep
they still
this
have to,
up. Yeah,
right,
if they wanna
they still
do
have to
that.
do that. And,
Yeah.
and if, and really what it means is that, you're talking less units.
Yeah.
But,
Right. So
So where's the entrance of the building? Where do the
It's on the side.
residents enter through that courtyard?
no, I think it's
Right here.
no, that's private. It's private, they enter.
Right here.
Under the 3 bedroom.
And there's a vestibule in the lobby,
it's the corner of the
corner of the building.
on the front.
Now, are we getting rid of the retail?
If you
Well,
look at
does
this,
everybody agree that
It
that
would
you
be-
prefer
it would
mixed
be
use
over
or residential?
Over here?
Yeah.
Or do
Okay.
you,
It would
be
is there,
off
what
of
is the
Church Street.
the consensus on mixed use versus residential?
I think all residential. I don't think we need mixed use there.
But are you going to put
first floor apartments?
Yeah, I mean,
Well, I
but
thought we talked about the lobby.
you have a
open
lobby in the
lobby.
beginning, and then you could have apartments behind the lobby.
You could have
But
bicycle
actually-
storage. You could have all
And
kinds
isn't there's some
I would
element
feel-
of parking
I don't.
under the building, right?
Yes.
So,
There is.
Right.
so I don't know how many units you'd have on the first floor.
You
I
wouldn't have
don't think
any.
you'd have any.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's no light there.
because once you take away the retail, the commercial use, you have to have room for systems and, trash or whatever, mechanical space
Right.
and whatnot. And then there's parking, because
Right.
part of the parking is under the building. So it's really, not effectively not going to be anything, any residential on the first floor.
So
But they-
so we're thinking here, what's retail there, you were saying this would just go away, or how would
Yeah.
that space?
It would go away, and that's part of what you're eliminating by pushing the building back. And we
Therefore,
could, you could
reconfigure.
still push the building back and have retail space there. But again, we question why would you want why do you need retail space
The
there?
only other commercial
Just to
section is
activate it.
past the roundabout, right? Where there is
Yes,
like falafel and a couple other
Yeah,
small
yeah,
stores.
yeah.
on Valley.
The
A 7-Eleven. or
On
something.
Valley.
Yeah.
And even the commercial space on the Sienna
Right.
stops.
There's
at
one
the
little
church.
store.
And so there will be nothing directly across the street from this commercial, this new commercial space that would be in this building, so.
You've got institutional uses right in close proximity, and then you have commercial and office on Valley, and you've got commercial in that little neighborhood commercial on the north.
On the other side of the
southwest.
roundabout.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But that's so far removed.
Yeah, it's like a neighborhood unto itself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, they're just,
Yeah.
so, what's the point of creating, some more token space there that far removed from
Right.
your commercial traffic?
When we could have a nice lobby or something that is usable by the general public.
Yeah, I just, on
And that
balancing.
enhances the church, the look of the leading into the churches and the Carnegie Library there and the historic buildings.
So the recommendation of the subcommittee of the board is that it not be commercial.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, I'm just a little split on this in that I would want it to be walkable where there are stores, but I do get the additional foot traffic in that area may not be desired.
Yeah,
but-
where they're
We've been trying
Yeah.
to keep that mindset,
Right.
for a while now. But again, it just, it really hit me when I looked at the aerial thing about these other buildings are never going to go away. You're never going to have that connection with Valley without this green space in between it. And if there were commercial spaces on that, building that's on the corner of Park and Church, if that was commercial space facing on Church Street there, I might have a different opinion, but that's the side of a restaurant. There is no reason to go down there unless you're coming out the fire exit, of the restaurant. So you have to walk past all of that to get to an isolated business or two.
So if we had the space to have green space there, as we've discussed, to have a small amount of commercial, mixed use in the building, I think could be positive, but, yeah.
Well, let
That
me
was my
offer,
initial thought, that.
Right, so people
that
can live
it's the
and-
heart of the
yeah.
downtown, and that it would be complementary to it to have some commercial space there. And I was a little surprised, but I'm not, know that I'm in position to overrule, Smith, Marin, and the thinking of the committee, but my own opinion is that it's the heart of downtown, and it seems appropriate to have some sort of commercial space there.
Full disclosure, Smith Marin was for the commercial space.
let me offer a suggestion.
Well, they disagreed, that's the point, is they
They
disagreed with what we want.
Yeah.
Because it seemed to me that it makes
Right.
sense.
I mean, you have it's a quiet space if you have churches there. Why bring in commercial space? And plus, then you need more parking. Right
the
now,
thought-
it's self-contained parking if you just have residential,
the-
is that correct? You
Well,
don't need
but
a
the
Those-
church becomes
those
somebody
plots, though,
to use
won't
that
be
commercial
used.
space. I mean, that.
The church?
Yeah, the church would, they can shop, they can go have coffee, they can do
How big is
whatever.
the commercial, how many square feet is
I think
the,
it's about, 1,500 square feet?
1,500 square feet?
5,000, but it might be smaller once we have the additional green space. in
Yeah,
the
so
front,
it's hardly anything,
that.
so why not just
They can
make
buy
it a
their
commercial,
newspaper.
a residential?
Well, we have.
Because you have the
enough of-
7-Eleven.
We have enough of those token spaces.
Yeah, we do.
That
and-
we've permitted
yeah,
in other buildings that wanted to have the mixed use.
Right,
That,
it doesn't work.
and
always.
again, if, for the shopping in the downtown area,
Mhm.
you'd have to make the leap over dead space.
Right.
Either you'd have to cross the street from the Sienna, or you'd have to go from the restaurant, from the corner, you'd have to walk along the dead side in order to get to one last commercial space. And, I mean, yeah, it's in the downtown, commercial is, but you got the rest of Church Street going the other way. You've got all the commercial space going in 3 different directions on the other side of
You
it.
also
So
have
is
this-
this really a loss?
You also have the 7-Eleven that down by the falafel place. You're talking
Right.
about just buying a newspaper or milk, and this, this could potentially compete with that. I don't know if that's a good thing.
I think this is a good place to have a transitional space.
Yeah.
Because you're going from semi-urban to semi-rural or, more suburban. And if you pull the building back, maybe in line with the line of the church,
Yeah.
and I don't know what you do with the space with it's designated as retail. I kind of agree that it's kind of a dead-end place. It's not really going to work. But you can probably make it into something that could be a community space, or it could be really opened up back in there too,
Well,
you know.
I think it's activated, that's the key
gotta
for
be
me. Like, I mean,
activated.
if it's, residential or non-residential, as long as it's activated, it's not just like some dead front or somebody's apartment.
Yeah, I think that's
I think
the,
that's where I fall on this.
and that's the main thing, and that's kind of why
Yeah.
I was for no retail, because I had trouble seeing how it could be activated as a retail space, unless you have, I don't know, Tiffany move in there, yeah, people, or something, people will go
And
to
the
it,
other,
but,
the only last point was just the other plots around there. I really will not be commercial. So that was
Right.
the other
Absolutely.
idea,
They will
that
never
that's
be
a reason
commercial.
to have potentially a little more space that could be commercial there. But so I was actually interpreting it the other way, saying these other plots, they are definitely set in stone. They will be how they are. And so this is one, other spot that could be, but
But I'm not sure why the focus so much on commercial when we have a problem renting ground level space in that particular area. Why are we adding to that inventory of retail space when we have, what did we count, 100 storefronts that were vacant on Bloomfield Avenue when
I
Jason
don't
was
think
here? I
that
know he
there's a
did a count.
vacancy problem in this vicinity.
There is, on Bloomfield Avenue across the street, there is.
Not in this.
Right in this little corner, maybe
That's a
not, but
different-
it's not that far away. It's a block
traffic and
away.
parking.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's a different creature.
Well,
Let me offer a suggestion.
Yeah.
Right now, the way the redevelopment plan is written, it requires a mixed-use building.
Right.
There's no option.
Mhm.
So we could always recommend changing that to allow either a mixed-use building or a 100% residential building. And that way, the design of the building will ultimately reflect the use,
Mhm.
how it's ultimately used. The developer could come in and design it so that it is either residential on the first floor, which would have a different look than a building that has a
Well,
commercial.
I think if we have a history, if we leave it up to a developer, it's always going to be all residential. Developer seems to feel, in general,
Yeah.
that it's more profitable.
Well,
because
probably,
everybody
you know
wants
what would
to
probably
live
happen?
in Montclair, but it's more difficult to set up circumstances where it's profitable to sell.
I think what will happen
retail.
is you'll get more parking. Because if you get rid of the retail space, you can fit more, essentially you could put more parking under the building.
Right, that was
So-
my point before.
That's correct.
and two, if we're pulling, the other downside about retail is that it won't be sidewalk, it'll be 15 feet back retail, which we've had mixed comments on that, as to whether or not that's really effective or not, whether stores want that arcade effect.
But then they want to have a freestanding sign out front.
Right.
When you, but when you talk about mixed use, when you talk about the arcade and that type of a setup, I mean, couldn't we talk about, a kiosk, pop-up shops, space that would give that flexible space? Does that count as mixed use? Or do you have to build this?
There's no prohibition against pop-up shops. So you don't have to write that into the ordinance, because they can do that anyway.
In the commercial space.
Yeah.
Again, the only thing is that in between pop-ups, you've got dead space.
Right.
So.
And
Well,
just to
I
make it clear,
found it
this is,
difficult. I must admit that I found it difficult to figure out exactly what the final decision was in terms of what being recommended that we should be doing. And I gather that the front of the building is, from what I thought, it looked like it was going to be 0 from the front. That's what it looks like.
That's what was.
And in
That
that
was
case, we're
proposed,
talking about what is generally what we do for commercial space. So I find it kind of very hard to understand what the commitment was in terms of what the recommendation is. It's unclear to me.
So the developer, I guess, came in and wanted to put the storefronts right on the
Right.
sidewalks,
But-
like we have on Valley and Bloom.
If we
And
follow
the little
recommend.
committee came back and said, no, we need a wider space.
Right, so what I'm
But
looking
now,
at.
but wait a minute, the EDC looked at it and said, no, we're back to the takeaway.
Well, this is what I'm looking
right?
at. I'm looking at the memo that came from this
Yeah.
committee.
No,
The
that's,
subcommittee.
no, that's the subcommittee's recommendation that was nixed by the EDC.
Which report are you looking at, Carol?
Okay, I'm
February
looking at
20th.
February
February
20th,
20th,
amended Haynes redevelopment plan, redevelopment subcommittee report.
Well, that's a misnomer then.
Well, see,
It's-
that's what's
No, I-
confusing.
I
Because I'm a
think-
little confused as to what the recommendation of the subcommittee
It's
is.
a subcommittee made the recommendations, and then the EDC looked at our recommendations and said, we don't agree with this.
If you
That's-
look at the
bold
that's in
face.
bold,
Yeah, yeah.
that's what the committee,
What the EDC said.
that was the committee's reaction, the committee's response to what was proposed by the developer.
Okay,
That's
so
what the
this-
EDC's committee.
Because
That's
these
why
are
I'm
the
confused,
changes.
Because it's.
These
okay.
are the changes on page 4, page 11, where they wanted to change the existing redevelopment plan, because that, after all, that's what we're doing here. We're talking about amending the redevelopment plan.
Right.
Right.
And in making the changes that were proposed, it would allow them to build this building, because this was the proposal of a building that they wanted to put on that site, making these changes. And we looked at it in terms of the building, and which is really not fully reflected in here, saying that, no, the building was too imposing, blah, blah, blah. But what this says is that where they want to change it, we said, okay, you want to change on page 11, number 6, and we're saying, no, we don't want to make that change. And
No, John, that's not right. What you're saying is not correct. So numbers 1 through 7, I guess, our subcommittee had made these suggestions, and then it went back to and that was based on what we initially saw from the redeveloper. We had made those suggestions. Then that went to the EDC, and the EDC comments are in bold.
Actually, those are-
Yes.
No, that's what was
So I'm not
introduced.
the only one confused.
Wait, wait, wait.
What's in bold is how the ordinance that was introduced by the governing body reflects what was, the changes that were recommended by the planning board.
By the
Right,
whole
you're,
board.
you're,
It's,
you're-
but it's
So-
that ordinance has been introduced.
So you've got it flipped, Carmen.
No, I don't.
What's in bold is what reflects our comment, because look at, just
Whose
for example,
comments?
look at page 2, comment F. Okay? We're the ones who said the maximum height was going to be
No.
5 stories.
Look at number 2 then.
you
Number
wanted it
2
6
says,
stories.
page,
You
we
wanted it
wanted
6
6 stories.
Really?
Yeah, look at number 2, John. It says page 11, 1,000 square feet, approximately 25 by 40. Community space is too small to be of practical use. Blah blah blah. But then the EDC looked at that and said this change was not made. So
The
our
council,
comments.
it's the full council. It was.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it was the EDC looked at this.
It was
That's-
it was the ordinance that was introduced by the council. And in that ordinance, that change was not made.
Right.
That's
It's
what-
the plan that we looked at that said, Haynes amended redevelopment plan. And we looked at that and said, no, here's what we'd like to see. And then when we made the changes 1 through 7, I understood that the EDC looked at that in consultation with Ira Smith, and he guided them. And then they responded with these, the bold-faced comments.
The bold-faced comments are the council's.
Council's EDC,
The
yeah.
bold-faced comments, I think, are the difference in our recommendations to the new ordinance that the council put out.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So just to back up quickly,
Yeah.
the way I think this happened is the council submitted ordinance number 1, we'll call it, referred it here. We reviewed it, or our subcommittee reviewed it. Their recommendations came up to this body. We all made a recommendation back to the council.
Yeah.
The council then pulled ordinance number 1 off the table, introduced ordinance number 2, and then now we're discussing ordinance number 2.
Right.
And according to Janice's memo here, some of the things that we recommended for ordinance 1 were accepted, some were not, along with, we have a
Right.
document from Smith Marin about why they may or may not have, they being the council.
That's correct. It's
May or may
just
not
a
have
different
included that.
terminology, but yeah, that is correct.
Yeah.
And what's confusing about this, there was all this back and forth before it came to the full board, you know.
Because you guys have more history with it because
Yeah,
of
yeah,
all
yeah.
your back and forth,
Yes,
and I
yeah.
think for maybe the rest of the board,
Yeah,
it
yeah.
may be a little bit more simple.
Yeah, we looked at the ordinance, we made changes, we gave them, we
Yes.
presented them to this board.
Yes.
You guys agreed, then we heard back from, I believe was the EDC, after they consulted with Smith Marin, and they didn't accept a lot of the changes that we
Yeah,
recommended.
you may have had additional
Yeah.
communications
Yes,
as the
we
subcommittee,
did.
but I think as this full board,
Right. Yeah,
we weren't included in that, which is just fine. That's why we have subcommittees.
just as well.
And you're right, this isn't really the subcommittee's report.
No.
This
Right.
is this is an annotated report. It's.
What else
I
you
should
gonna
say
call
the
it?
first paragraph basically summarized what the redevelopment subcommittee's comments were. I then added the following just to show what changes we're talking about and what was changed in the plan and how your original comments were addressed in the plan. So that when I'm in trying to craft a report from from tonight,
Yeah.
So beyond the semantics, because when I read this,
Yeah.
I was having the same trouble, and then because I know what I know,
Yeah.
and was there at the thing, I kind of like fit it into the pocket so that
Right.
I could make sense
Yeah.
of it. But
Yeah, read it as you
So,
were updating us on what.
with
yeah.
respect to our reaction to this change, I think it's the committee's view hasn't changed. The view
Right.
that we originally submitted
Right. Has
hasn't
not
changed.
well,
Yeah.
that I think, for instance, I think the 20-foot side yard setback would be fine with you.
Because it's more than what we asked
Right.
for, yes.
Yeah.
And the 5-yard side yard setback on the other side is fine because you had asked for 0. That's the east side. I think you want the front yard setback of 15 feet, from what I'm hearing. You want the 15-foot rear yard setback
Yep.
instead of 5 feet. We haven't even gotten to step backs, but I don't think there's a consistent viewpoint on the residential versus mixed use. I don't know. You have-
Well, I thought we agreed, we liked residential, but the way you stated it, where they would have the option,
I don't know how you feel on that. I just
Yeah.
threw that out. I don't know how everybody else feels
Yeah.
on.
I just want it to be activated. I mean, to me, if they go for the 15-foot setback on the front, I think it does leave very little for commercial, but I'm not opposed to it being there. I think it might be a little wonky with the setback, but I just want something activated.
You probably end up with a food use, an ice cream or yogurt shop that can put little tables and chairs out there. So I think by putting the setback, there's a change in the street wall, but there is ways for that space to be activated.
can I
And
ask?
how do we craft that into a recommendation?
That's
the
the problem
option.
with we can't write a redevelopment plan that requires activation, because
That's subjective.
no applicant can guarantee that activation. They can attempt to try and secure somebody who might use it, but they can't guarantee that it's going to work.
But can I
and-
ask, why do you really feel that needs to be activated rather than just a apartment building, like the place across the street. Is it called the Roosevelt? Why not have just an apartment building there? That's a quiet apartment building that leads into this church space and the library space across the street. And, you know, they just have to walk around the corner, and then they're in activated South Park Street and up Church Street. And why have another space that has, you know, activity?
If I can throw it, the one thing that
commercial activity,
the
yeah.
one point that was brought up, I think, by Iris Smith, which makes sense, is when you move the building back 15 feet and the adjacent building is at the street line, it exposes the side of that commercial building.
Right.
Which is generally, this is.
Oh, I talked about that. Put
Yeah.
a tree there.
Yeah, or do a,
You know, and I say
fresco or something.
I say that facetiously, but you can dress up that corner of
Yeah,
the building.
you could do something really creative
You
there.
know.
It's a lovely corner to try to be creative. If you think about what that apartment building is looking at, the side of that sienna there is awful. It's
Put a
just this
green wall
blank
there.
wall.
Put
But
a
why
green
didn't-
wall, a trestle,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, green
and
wall would be
the
lovely.
priority for me is the front yard setback, which we discussed, and having the green space. And if it does turn out that commercial is not feasible, I just think of having mixed-use commercial individuals that don't need cars, the more access they can have to kind of walking and using services around them, the better. But you're right that it may not work here. And I think writing it such that it's up to them whether it is 100% residential or perhaps activated as commercial. As long as we have the setback in the front, I think
Yeah.
that's really up to them to decide.
Let them
Like,
decide.
we don't feel like we need to stipulate it's 100% residential necessarily.
So the artwork that we've got here does not reflect the final
No.
thing we're talking about?
No, that's where we're kind of reacting against, I
Right,
think.
Okay, so
Yeah.
essentially what I'm hearing is.
If the building is set back and there's exposed building of the,
Park Street.
parks, who owns that building? We can't dictate to that building what they have to do.
No, I'm just
on
saying,
their-
you'll see 15, I believe it's a two-story building,
Right.
Wedgwood building. You'll see the side of it 15 feet back. And I know that's where they have their dumpster over
Right.
there and their,
They do.
so you could create a really nice front yard setback, but you're you're gonna be exposing the more unattractive side of that building.
Worst
and
scenario.
Be screened.
The builder of this building erects a trestle, plants some vines, so it goes up, it
Okay.
covers it
So-
on, on this building's property.
Okay, that's,
You
okay.
can camouflage it. That's why I said a tree.
Yeah.
You know, you don't have to require the owner of the building.
Of the other building,
But
the Wedgwood
you might
building,
want to,
right.
you might want to, with the financial incentive that you're getting from, you might want to take a portion of that and give, hey, why don't you do something nice? Put a green wall on the back of your building or something like
Yeah.
that. There are ways around it. It's not,
Okay.
that
Yeah.
shouldn't be a deal. The fact that you have this 15 feet of wall exposed shouldn't be a deal killer.
Okay.
When there's plenty of ways to
There's
camouflage.
no telling what they'll do in the future, but there's also additional space now here. I think there's a fence and garbage there
That's the
now.
garbage area.
Right, and so the 2 stories up, or 2.5 stories up, is off by maybe 15 feet
Yeah.
anyhow, right?
Yeah.
So it's not that
It's
whole
not
wall
that,
is right
right.
at the edge.
Right.
But,
And you'd want to camouflage the back of that building anyway,
Yeah.
regardless. So, it's not, but it's not.
Shouldn't drive the
rocket
whole
science
deal
to do
here,
that.
yeah.
No,
You know.
I understand.
So from what I'm hearing from the comments, that you want to eliminate the requirement for mixed use and allow either 100% residential or a mixed-use building,
I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
okay?
I'm okay
Good
with
with
that.
it.
All right.
okay, that's great. That
So
works.
moving on to the next change that you recommended is the step back above the 3rd floor, where you required 10 feet. That change was not made. I believe the redevelopment plan allowed an averaging of the step back so that the average turned out to be 8 feet. Because it was at an angle, it's not a straight line. So, and you have it, and that was just the front. You want it 10 feet on all sides of the building at the 3rd floor. Okay. So if you want to keep that comment in, I'll keep that
Well,
comment
they
in.
said something about 30-foot step back at the 2nd floor, right?
That's on the back side above the 1st floor.
Yeah, I think we.
It's on the east side.
That's basically a courtyard. We could keep that in
Oh, yeah,
there
the east
because
side,
they
right.
need
I
that.
think that's good.
Right.
Oh, okay.
and a minimum step back above the 5th floor, 20 feet. If you're going to allow them to go up to 6 stories.
I like the 5-story better.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's keep it at 5 stories.
Okay.
The only reason, again, why we said 6 stories was because we were trying to give them a little bit more give if they were pulling it back. But,
No, I prefer the 5.
it's
yeah.
better,
It was a trade-off for the affordable housing.
It was a
as well,
trade-off.
in our
Right.
view.
Okay.
What we see here is the 6th floor, and that's the 6th floor there, set back,
If-
just the edge of it that we see.
It's only 5 stories.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know if they had a smaller setback, 6-story.
No, I think
That's
it's
just
just-
electrical.
Right,
Right.
right. And I think there was a rooftop amenity. If you look at the,
Okay.
there's a
There was.
rooftop plan.
Okay.
So that would eliminate E. You don't need the step backs for the 5th floor. E would go out. Stay and then send it to whoever wants, to the redevelopment subcommittee or to the full?
Oh, so why don't I send it to the redevelopment subcommittee?
Okay.
Okay.
All right. And then once the redevelopment the
We'll make
chair,
sure that it's consistent
chair and
with our
vice chair
discussions this evening.
feels that it reflects the sentiments of the planning board, then I'll send it to the council.
Jen, just to be clear, I'm just sending you the points where,
Right.
and I'm not writing.
Regarding the consistency with the master
Yeah,
plan,
right.
right.
Yeah.
The rest
Okay.
of it I can handle.
Yeah, okay, just want to be sure. Okay.
Any other comments from board members?
Just-
All right,
I
so
didn't
then, the next thing and last thing, no? Next thing.
Do we need a motion?
I
we
just
need a-
want, I didn't also, I included in your packet a report from the Housing Commission. I think you've already addressed it because the Housing Commission wants to see the 20% set aside maintained. So the planning board did receive that.
Do we need a motion?
Yes, I need a motion.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I'll abstain.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, now that brings us to the letter of support for Green Acres application.
Right. This is fairly self-explanatory. We're doing a the DEP has reopened Green Acres funding this year. And the Department of Community Services sent me the projects, their proposal for funding for Green Acres for improvement projects in the township, and requested a letter of support from the planning board, which is what I've sent to you. Okay? And they're really looking for a communication that these improvements are consistent with the master plan. And really, it's taking our existing resources, because they're being overutilized, and that's what our master plan identifies, that our existing open space resources are highly utilized because of the number of groups using it, and that there's a real need for finding alternative resources to maintain them and enhance them.
You know what's up with Edgemont?
I don't know.
Drainage is,
It's terrible.
yeah. If that was Green Acres, I'd say let's find out what's going on with the money.
Well, I think I don't know. I'd have to talk to community services about that.
I don't think it was Green Acres money. The new improvements that were made?
Well, I guess the
Yeah.
point is, you know, I think it's worse now at Edgemont.
It's far worse.
Because of the building?
They tore it up, and the drainage is above the surface of the...
Yeah, the regrading was
You
not.
mean the sheet flow across the park?
No.
Where's the drainage? Where are the drainage issues?
Well, right along the
Right along
pathway.
the walkway, the new walkways, the new
it's
pathways.
probably sheet flow across the grassy areas.
I don't know what sheet flow means.
It's not
How the
draining.
water drains.
It
and travels
drains
across.
flat, not like in a culvert.
Yeah.
Kind of
Yeah,
but
that's
they-
Right.
and,
They
and
Put drains that are above the surface of the ground.
There's
yes,
something
I saw that. I mean, the drop inlets are above the height of the ground.
we are aware of that. The Parks Department is aware of that, and we've had many complaints. And the Friends of Group are on top of it. It's going to be addressed.
Who's the
Yes.
engineer? Who designed this?
There wasn't an engineer firm. It was a landscaping and
It may just have been the way that it was
hardscape.
installed.
I'm just
Because-
go through there, it just seems like a waste of money.
And they designed it, but the actual construction, I don't remember the name of the company who got the bid, but it's being addressed.
So I'm sure they didn't design it with the drains above.
Right.
So more in the
But it's-
execution, it's sort of...
It's a
It's an-
construction
it's the
inspection issue,
execution.
usually.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's what it is. 'Cause they've got all the drainage.
Well, that's not part of this project.
That's true.
Drains will be below.
So are they going to, when they clear trees, are they going to, will the township follow its own tree ordinance? And how would that work in a park?
I'm sure that the
Would hope so.
township will monitor it, but we're not going to pay money into pay ourselves money for each tree we take down. But I think clearly the intent is to take down as few trees as possible.
Well, Essex definitely needs it. Right?
Yeah, yep.
I have a question. I forget, is it Erie Park? Is that the park that's by Walnut Street
Yeah,
Station? So is that part of the Essex Park? I
No.
mean, they're
No.
kind of a continuation. So nothing is being done on that park? No benches added, no playground?
No?
Does anybody ever think of doing anything there? It's kind of just this...
Well, we talked about it. The EDC talked about it.
We did.
Trying to get the parklet initiative off the street and into Erie Park.
Oh.
to-
Right, that
Oh,
was
that's
discussed,
interesting.
yeah.
And no?
So that
I
was
mean,
the
it's being discussed
Oh, it's being
still,
discussed
so I
now.
don't know
Oh, okay.
what the
It
outcome will
was
be.
the
but
suggestion that we
yeah.
get some, much like Edgemont Park and Anderson Park had these organizations that embraced them, Crane Park,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and they, same thing for Erie Park. We discussed that at the EDC and
Yeah.
are trying to direct.
Right.
That might be a
Powers
good
that be.
park for a dog run, a lot, because there's the pound there, a lot of people walk their dogs there.
Yeah.
Just a thought.
Weren't the tennis courts at Mountainside Park done recently?
Yes.
Within the last 3 to 5 years?
Well, weren't those the clay
what-
ones?
Yeah,
Well,
they
all
pulled
of
out, they pulled out the clay and made them hard.
I
Right.
think it was just the clay ones. I don't really know.
So-
Again, I didn't, this is what was given to me.
Right, because it says the tennis courts have cracks and are in substandard condition, but
Did
they were done fairly recently.
Was that all of the tennis courts or just the clay ones?
I'm not 100% sure, but
I know they definitely took out the clay and made them hard
Yeah,
for
right.
it. I
yeah.
don't remember if they refinished the other
refinished
side
the other
or not.
side?
Yeah,
I don't remember.
yeah.
But again, that would be probably a
question.
construction inspection issue.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but don't
Be
we get
honest
any
with you.
construction guarantees when that
I
kind of
would hope
work is done?
Yeah,
That
I
we
think
could
we
get
do.
some compensation? It's like
I
the
would think we
trees, like
do.
I had, 2 trees planted in front of my house and they died like immediately, and don't
That's
they ever
being
get
addressed.
replanted?
They will, but there was
They
a
will?
1-year guarantee for all the dead trees, and
Yeah.
that's
Yeah, the
That's
dead one in
been
front of
looked
my house
into.
was replaced.
There's
I know.
2 on my street,
Right,
too.
they even seem to
Just so-
plant dead
just so you
ones,
know
never
that-
mind
So, and
dying.
Daniel made a good question. These list of projects were given to me by the
Right.
Department of Community Services, who maintains our parks.
Right.
I didn't draft them.
Right.
No, I just wanted to know.
Okay.
Yeah.
They basically said, Janice, this is what we want to do. Can we get a letter of support? So,
And what's,
Right.
are there numbers behind any of this? What are we asking for?
I don't know. I don't know. I haven't, I can find out from Norberto, because he's the one who's doing it. He's the town engineer.
And it doesn't need to be overly detailed, but just so we know what we're supporting, it's like, how did we decide what gets prioritized, how much is going to it, when might it be done?
And because then there's Rand Park that
Okay,
has
my question
nothing.
for you is, this is due in next month, so I need to get this letter. They
Well, and I
need
don't-
this letter of support
And I
now.
don't think it's really our job to figure out what parks need
Yeah, no.
servicing in the township. I mean, there's a department, there's a council.
Yeah.
I mean,
But
yeah, I was like, I appreciate everyone's input too.
But here
and-
it is. But here it is listed.
certainly
I mean,
thrown in
so
some
why
of mine.
bother list? I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, but it's here.
Right. I mean, I look at it simply, is it consistent with the master plan? And I think
Yeah.
it is.
So can I
Okay.
make a motion to, oh,
Yeah.
I could give you some input because we're in the Parks and Rec Committee. We should, we do have a liaison for our Parks and Rec, which is and also, I think Tim Barr, you were at some point in time involved in helping support the draft of master plan as it relates to open space. At some point, yes.
We didn't, there was no progress made on that,
So
so.
what we do with the Parks and Rec, anything dealing with parks within the township of Montclair, we work with Mr. Woods, and we would appreciate a copy of the recommendations because we would be supporting any improvements in the parks.
Were you involved with Department of Community Services work project, Green Acres application?
Some parts of it does and some parts no.
Okay. Maybe they need a letter, I think they're going to want a letter of support from you too.
Okay, well,
Well, at some point in time, we knew that there was some issues with some of the construction in some of the new parks, the baseball fields, I don't know, the baseball fields, the tennis courts, the basketball courts, and there was some issues with the contractor. And they were supposed to be going back, because matter of fact, we had some work done in Canterbury Park, and within 6 months, we were seeing cracks in the tennis courts and the basketball courts.
Wow.
So there should have been some
Right.
bonding to make sure that we were getting properly work done in the parks and Rec. We, Parks and Rec, we definitely made the Department of Community Affairs aware of this. This has been going on for about 6 months, if not a little bit longer. We want to make sure that we have the documentation for this issue.
So if I can make a suggestion, the letter that's proposed, that's attached to what we received, is pretty generic. I don't see anything in there that I would be uncomfortable saying. But I think we should have a separate communication to the Parks and Recreation to ask for more information, in the future. When they're asking for our support, if they could give us a little bit more information, so that we have a better basis upon which to review this and make a determination. And also ask them, if they would let us know about the problems that are, going on with the recently renovated, areas or projects that may be currently experiencing problems, and, to give us an idea of how those things are going to be addressed.
Okay.
Maybe the
The only
answer is.
thing I saw on the,
well,
I'm
sorry.
sorry.
Go ahead.
The second sentence of the second paragraph says the conservation plan identifies an implementation strategy necessary to improve the balance between man-made and natural resources. And in reading the memo, you can't really tell that the balance is there, but the last sentence seems true because it says that the plan recommended getting a Green Acres grants, which is like a circular argument. So if someone could say, we're going to improve the balance between the man-made and natural resources, then we could say it conforms with the conservation plan of the master plan. But, you know what I'm saying? We can't really read this stuff and make a statement.
Which statement? That it,
The conservation
Balance,
plan
yeah.
identifies an implementation strategy necessary to improve the balance between man-made and natural resources. Reading this memo, you can't really tell if there's whatever it says.
We haven't seen
We
the
don't
plan.
have seen it, so I'd say, you can't say that sentence, but
Well,
you can say the last, because
I-
it reads.
But I think it does, because that's what the conservation plan says.
Right, and I think
But
I
is
think,
what they're doing going to,
no, it's just making a statement about what the plan says. It
to me,
doesn't
it's a
say.
statement of what the plan
but
says.
this is a recommendation for the application. The presumption is that the application will comport with what that sentence says. in
Well,
the
alternative
application.
resources, and that's, this grant is an alternative resource.
and I think,
Well,
I
that's the
think,
last sentence I was talking about. We get that in terms of getting money from Green Acres. I'm talking about the second sentence of the last paragraph.
I think, let me explain, I think the conservation, I mean, because I took that quote directly from the conservation plan, because I think while we're basically putting these funds to basically our man-made resources.
Okay, I guess my question
Without
is, the guy
using-
who put this together, who's spending the money, is he going to do what it says in the plan? Is there going to be an improvement in the balance between man-made and natural resources, whatever that is? We just,
I think, well, at least the man-made portion, the man-made half of
So
it,
you
by,
can't
and
really
leaving
tell
the
from
natural resources the way they are. You know, we have a lot of passive parks. They're gonna stay the way they are, rather than expand, you know, any of our improvements to some of our passive parks. So maybe I can say here, our passive parks will remain passive parks and unimproved by putting the investment into our improved active parks using these resources. And that way we maintain the balance. You see what I mean?
it says improve the balance. Let's say maintain. I'm just trying to read what
I'm
it says
trying my
here.
best to interpret what the master plan says.
I'm sorry.
Well, isn't it
Yeah,
helping?
I was away for a long time, so you have to talk a lot.
I mean, isn't this improving the balance? Because, you know, where the tennis courts are perhaps slightly unusable because of these issues, so you're improving that balance now
There you go.
between nature and...
Let's go with that. That sounds
Okay.
good.
We've gotten too natural.
Count on Keith.
I would say we're too natural. I mean, I don't like trees being ripped up, but I also feel like the parks are an important portion of our township, and, you know...
No, I meant nature destroying the surfaces.
Yeah.
like-
Destroying the balance.
Right.
Yeah, it's like the bees that are eating my house. Yeah. Maybe if we got a copy of the grant application, our questions would be answered
I
about.
think the grant, honestly, I think the grant application is, it's a work in
Oh,
progress.
I see.
So, having done grants before. Okay, so I need a
After all
motion,
that letter is good.
a motion to approve the letter of support.
Second?
So who moved it? You, Carmel? Second by
Second.
Robin? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. And next we have bills.
I see no issues with the bills.
Okay,
And seeing no other comment, I would move to approve them.
Good enough for me.
I need a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay.
All right, thank you, everyone.
And we are done at 8:55. Welcome back.
No, I already,